the previous video, we've seen how we could put variables inside of our HTML templates, but we also said that the Django templating language is even more powerful than that. There are a number of additional features that the Django language is going to give us, and one of these features is conditionals. And I'm going to start by introducing you to a website that you may be familiar with. It's considered one of the simplest websites on the internet. It's an old website called Is It Christmas Now? So, without now.com. It's going to give you no if today is not Christmas, and it's going to give you yes if today is Christmas. So, this website is very simple. You might imagine that it's really just an HTML page that probably contains a big heading that in this case just says the word no, but on Christmas Day just says the word yes. Now, how might a page like this be implemented? Well, one way you could imagine is on Christmas Day, someone goes to that website and changes the HTML to yes, and afterwards changes the yes back to a no. But we can be a little bit cleverer about this if you realize that now we have the ability to use Python logic when using Django. And so we'll be using those also in the Django HTML templates, using that Django HTML language. So maybe we would add a conditional that says if it is Christmas, then print yes, and if it's not, it's no. So let's go ahead and see one of those features that Django has given to us, which is that conditional. And so in this is a Christmas example, and we'll be doing a Halloween example. So we'll be asking if it's if it's Halloween or not, by saying if it's that specific date or not. So first we need to create a new application, and to create a new application, we're going to inside of our directory, inside of our project, we're going to type in python manage.py start app, and let's call this app Halloween. So now the moment we hit enter, we should have a newly created application inside of my project 1 called Halloween. And so you can see we have all the files that we will be using. So let's go ahead and first create the urls.py for this new application. So urls.py, and as we've said, in order to create URLs, we need to import from the path from django.urls, and we need to import views from here, so from our directory, from the Halloween directory, where we'll be importing views. And now create our URL patterns list. So patterns, and we're going to add URLs or paths inside of our list. And now I'll head to my project and add the URL of my new application to here to the URLs of my project, so which is called Halloween, and because the name of my application is called Halloween, I will be including all the URLs of this application, so inside of my Halloween.urls. So, and of course we need to add a comma to separate these paths. And one last thing we need to do is to go to the settings and add this new application, which is Halloween, to So now if we run our server, it must go fine. So now we need to create our function that's going to so let's close this. That's going to be doing for us the logic that if it's Halloween or not. And first let's go ahead and create that function, that index function, and which is going to take a request from the user. And now I might want to add some logic that checks whether it's October 31 or not. And so how might I go about doing that in Python? Well, it turns out that there's a datetime module in Python, and you can learn about this by just looking up about its documentation to know how it works. And the datetime module gives me access to things about the date and time, for instance. So first I'm going to import the datetime module, and now the first thing I want to do inside of my function is to know what day it is. So to do so, I'm going to be creating the variable called now, as in today, the current time, and I'm going to use from the datetime module, I just imported a function which is datetime dot time dot time dot now. So now that now function is going to give us the date, the current date. And now that we have the current date, we're going to return a rendered HTML template, so upon a request, of course, and that template is going to be Halloween / index. So this is the index.html, and I'd like to pass in some variable into my HTML page, that index.html, and that variable is Halloween date. So if now that month is equal to 10, as if this month, the current month, is October, and at the same time now dot day, as in today's day, is equal to 31, this is going to be true, as in today is actually Halloween. So let's just fix that. Okay, so we pass this parameter, which is going to give us true if today is if the month is 10 and today is 31, and it's going to give us false otherwise. Now let's go ahead and create our templates and add that index.html. So as we previously said, so inside of my Halloween, I'll be adding a new folder which is called templates, and inside of my new of my templates folder, I'll create another folder which is called Halloween, which is the name of my application. And now inside of Halloween, I'm going to create a new file which is called index.html. Sorry. Now inside of my HTML file, I'll be creating this HTML document. Let's remove these for now, and let's call this web page, give it a title of is it Halloween, and I'm going to add inside of my body unconditional, and that's because of Django. Django is going to give me the ability to add a conditional to my HTML template. And so I'm going to be saying if, and the if condition in Django starts with adding these curly brackets and then followed by a percentage sign. And so inside of it, that if word, and and we close that if statement by closing, adding the same percentage sign and closing that curly bracket. And to add that if statement, I'm going to add inside of these brackets and the percentage sign and statement, which is end if. And now I can add inside of my if statement whatever I want to add. So first, of course, we need a condition to our if statement. So what might be my condition? So if you remember in views.py, we had this function, this index function, which is going to return for us that index.html, which is right here, and it's going to be adding a parameter to this HTML page, which is Halloween day, which is going to be true if it's Halloween. So if its month is 10 and day is 31, so it's going to be true or false. So if it is Halloween day, so if it is true, so it has to be the same name. So if it's true, I'm going to say yes. And now I need an else statement, so I can add inside of my if statement an else statement. So I'm going to be adding an else, and of course I need to put it inside of these curly brackets followed by a percentage sign. So else, if it's not true, if it's not Halloween, I'm going to say no, it's not. So one last thing we need to do is add that function to our urls.py. So we're going to add a default path, and that default path is going to take us to views.index, and let's give it a name of index. So this is our path, this is our function, and this is our index.html. So let's go ahead and try to run this application. But first, you might notice that there are some things that seem off in views.py, and one of these things is that equal sign. So this must be a double equal sign, and because we are comparing these two objects and we want this to return for us true or false, so now that day equal to 31 is going to be returning true or false. The second thing is that we need to indent. So you can see that here is no indentation. So be careful that inside your function you need to indent. The third thing is here it has to be import and not from. So these are three things that seemed off in my code and that we need to fix, or else our CMD would give us an error. And now let's go ahead and run our project. So Python manage.py run server, and now we go ahead and copy that URL and go ahead and paste it here, and let's start with Halloween. So you can see here that today is actually not Halloween, and that's why this page gave us a no. So now we might want to make this no bigger, a little bit larger. So one way to do so is using this static file CSS. So let's go ahead and go back to my code. As I've said, maybe I'd like to add some custom CSS to this file as well, and we could do this conventionally the way we do it by just including a CSS file, and that is what we'll be doing. But Django has a special build system for dealing with what are called with static files that are not going to be changing. So this HTML page is not a static file because it changes depending on the condition whether it's Halloween or not. So if I visit on Halloween, it's going to be saying yes, and otherwise it's going to be saying no. And so this is a dynamic page. However, static files are files that don't change, like CSS. The CSS doesn't change whether it's Halloween or not. And because that file is unchangeable, Django calls it a static file, which means that Django is going to be a little bit clever about that. And if you think about static files in Django, you might want to store them in a special place where you can access them in a faster way later on. And we'll be talking about that later on more. But for now, just know that Django has features that makes it easier for us to deal with static files, such that the CSS file. And the way we'll add static files inside of our application, that Halloween, is by adding the same way we've added that template / Halloween. I'll be creating a static file folder where I'll be including the files of my application. So first, I'll go ahead and, not inside of templates, inside of Halloween, I'll be creating a new folder. It's called static, and inside of static, I'll be creating a new file, which, let's call it Halloween, which is the name of my application. And now, inside of Halloween, I'll be creating a new file, which is, let's call it style.css. And now, before I get into style, let's just add yes and no inside of a heading one, just to make it a little bit larger, and in order to reference it inside of style.css. So in style.css, we can reference right now those yes and no. So let's give it this h1 a font. Let's have a bigger font size, and let's put it, let's say, as sensitive. Let's start with the font family. Let's give it a sans serif. And now for the size, let's put it 100 pixels. And for the text alignment, we'll be centering it. And let's put the background color to be orange. And the font color, or the color, to be black. So now let's go ahead and refresh our page, and you can see that nothing changed, and that's because we did not link our CSS file to our index.html file. So in order to do that, below title, we're going to add a link relation. So we're going to be adding a link with a relation style sheet and a reference. So now the referencing is quite a little bit different if you know actual CSS and HTML. But because now we're inside of Django, in order to reference it, we'll be adding inside of curly brackets a percentage, this name static first, because this is a static file, followed by the name Halloween/style.css. So where is this file found? And let's go close that string. And now we're going to close that curly brackets and that way. So that is the way you reference that style sheet or CSS file inside of this HTML. So now let's go ahead and refresh our page, and as you can see, we get an error, and that's because we did not load our static file. And in order to do that, we have to add inside of our index.html load static to our HTML page. That way the static files will be loaded to our HTML page. But just to recap on what we did, so here I'm including this URL, which I can do. And Django's best practice is, let's just say it's going to be a static file, so that's why we added the static. And I'm not going to exactly specify what the URL is, but I'm saying that it's a static file inside of Halloween folder called style.css, and Django is going to figure out what the URL ought to be. And this is better than hard coding the URL. So maybe because you might imagine in larger applications when your static files are might be many, and you might move your static files to enter a different domain or a track. And so in order to deal with that, this static keywords, that means that Django is going to figure out the URL that you've typed in, and it's going to replace it instead of Halloween/style.css, instead of this whole thing inside of that percentage sign and curly brackets. And now if we go ahead and refresh, you can see that we have no, and which has a background color which is orange inside of that H1, and which has a larger font, and as I said, in the center, and of course it's in black. So this is one way we could use we can make use of conditions in Django. So you can see that we've created a very simple page that tells us if it's Halloween or not. And so in the next lectures, we're going to see additional features that we can use in HTML Django.